Now, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez is back in Cuba for more cancer treatment, including chemotherapy. He's transferred some powers to his ministers during his absence, but didn't agree to opposition calls for a temporary handover of all presidential authority. For more on the current situation in Venezuela, let's now speak to an expert on Latin American politics, Adrian Salbuchi, who's talking to us via broadband from Buenos Aires. Thank you for joining us today. So officially, Hugo Chavez says he still plans to run for re-election next year, but just how much of an issue are these health problems to the country's political process?
Well, no doubt they are an issue because the Bolivarian government or regime in Venezuela is very much centered on Mr. Hugo Chavez. Although he is rather ill, he has to again go to Cuba for chemotherapy. He has not relinquished power as the opposition at the National Assembly requested, but rather he has delegated some of his functions to the Executive Vice President Elias Jawa and to the Minister of Planning and Finance, Mr. Jorge Giordani. The problem here being that his regime counts with a lot of internal and external opposition and adversaries, notably funded and supported politically, economically, and eventually even militarily by the United States of America. And the United States is clearly bent on making its regime change policies, which we are seeing now in North Africa and in the Middle East, bring them over to Latin America. So I'm speaking from Buenos Aires in Argentina. I am particularly concerned that Hugo Chavez's health problems will weaken the present government in Venezuela, and that will be seen as an opportunity by the United States, or rather by the global power elite that operates from the United States, to promote regime change in Venezuela. And if it starts in Venezuela, it will no doubt spread to other countries, notably Ecuador, Bolivia, and perhaps even Argentina.
It is very interesting that you bring in the issue of America here and the so-called global elite, because Chavez has been so anti-Washington for years now. He's very outspoken in condemning American policies around the world, and he has alliances with Cuba, Iran, and Syria. What would the wider implications be then of any change to the leadership? You talk about regime change. Is that really the main focus here?
Well, no doubt about it. We are seeing now how the global power elites, which I insist work from Washington, from London, but are not identified with the people of Britain or the people of America. Rather, they have their own agenda. Their number one enemy is the sovereign nation state, which helps to explain what we have seen in Libya, what we are seeing in the Middle East and the North Africa, even in the European countries with different methods, and that we will very likely see throughout Latin America. Now, Mr. Chavez has correctly assessed the problem in the sense that there is a global agenda on this. Perhaps his tactics are wrong or not the best because he has been too open in his support of Libya, in his support of Iran, and that in a way has isolated him and put him with a problem, for example, with countries like Colombia that are pro-United States, or Brazil, which is also quite pro-United States. So he might be left on his own. But irrespective of the tactics, which might be good or bad, very often when you face a powerful enemy, you have to be more discreet and less outspoken. But nevertheless, I believe that the diagnosis that Mr. Chavez has made is correct. We might be able to argue whether his tactics are the best considering the circumstances.
Now, we do know that Hugo Chavez and Cuba's Fidel Castro are very close friends indeed. Venezuela is also critical to Cuba's stability, given the close alliance between the two nations. How would any changes in Caracas affect the situation in Cuba, do you think?
Well, you know, there is a very old agreement that goes back to the former Soviet Union after the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Berlin Wall crisis, whereby America has accepted strategically to be hands off Cuba. So I wouldn't envision another Bay of Pigs invasion on Cuba ever. However, Venezuela is a different story altogether, and I think that the Cubans are making an intelligent and stable transition, which Venezuela will not be able to do. So if anything, I foresee that in the coming months, I hope I'm wrong, but in the coming months and years, there will be increasing activity from the United States and its allies to promote regime change throughout Latin America, which will eventually help also to bring about regime change in Cuba itself.
Adrian Salbuchi, an expert on Latin American politics. Many thanks.
Thank you.